What if the oldest question in philosophy wasn't about truth at all, but about how to live when truth costs you something? Socrates walked into Athens with a simple weapon: questions. Not clever rhetoric, but a relentless willingness to unsettled certainty. He didn't preach one fixed answer. He pressed for the kind of clarity that stings. The clarity that forces a choice between belief and complacency. And in that pressure, he began to challenge the very roots of moral value. In a city poised between piety and power, between the old gods and the new ambitions of democracy, Socrates didn't claim to know the good. He claimed to know how to seek it. He would wander the agora and ask people to articulate what they meant by virtue, courage, justice, piety. The responses were usually easy to swallow until he pressed for proof, for consistency, for the cost of living by such words. The moral life, he showed, wasn't a slogan handed down from above. It was a puzzle that required your own mind to solve. What began as a classroom of questions became a public interrogation. Socrates believed that moral values deserve scrutiny as if they were hypotheses, not commandments carved in stone. If goodness were a thing you could own or boast about, you would expect it to withstand examination. He didn't attack virtue. He attacked certainty about virtue. If someone said X is right, he asked, why is X right? For whom? Under what conditions? What would count as wrong, and why do we reject it? The habit of thinking, not the habit of following, became his ethical creed. Consider the famous tests he gave to Athenian life. What makes a person good? Is it obedience to tradition? Or something more demanding, an understanding that goodness must be earned, tested, and practiced? Socrates didn't deny the value of communal norms. He questioned whether those norms were actually informed by insight or simply by power. The moral landscape, in his view, was a field to till, not a map to memorize. Then came the Euthyphro dilemma, a compact paradox that splits the ground under most conventions. Is what is morally good loved by the gods because it is good? Or is it good because the gods love it? If the first, morality exists independently of the gods and even challenges, Socrates didn't settle the dispute with a single sentence. He pressed it until the options felt unstable, perhaps even impossible to reconcile. The result wasn't nihilism, but we must test morality not by authority, but by reasons that can survive scrutiny, conversation, and time. What does this mean for a civilization that trades in honor, oath, and ritual? It means ethics cannot be a package deal offered by priests or rulers. It must be a practice, a method, a stubborn discipline of inquiry. Socrates treated virtue as a kind of knowledge, a craft one could learn through dialogue, practice, and disciplined self-scrutiny. If virtue is knowledge, then ignorance is the core of vice. The deadly error would be to mistake confident opinion for moral insight. The antidote is slow inquiry, a willingness to admit when you don't know, and the stubborn courage to refine your beliefs anyway. SFX, Heartbeat 1.5. This is where his method becomes a social experiment. People in power do not surrender easily to questions about justice or piety. The city's laws, customs, and sacred practices often rest on consensus and fear of disruption. Socrates didn't invoke a different law so much as insist on a different standard for living. He argued that you cannot claim piety or justice simply by repeating the family story or following the crowd. You must demonstrate it in how you treat the weak, how you reason about your obligations, how you respond when your own certainties are dismantled on the witness stand of thought. His conversations with political figures, craftsmen, and poets reveal a pattern. Each interlocutor feels the weight of a moral claim, then discovers that the claim has not been tested beyond the surface. The mayor's decree is morally meaningful only if it can withstand the question, what makes this decree just in light of the good for all? The soldier's valor is real as long as it isn't merely bravado in the face of fear. What is bravery? When fear is your constant companion. The philosopher's role in Socrates' Socrates' own voice, is to hold up a mirror to the city and say, you must face what you intend to do with your power once you know what you truly value. And so the method becomes a moral experiment. Measure, compare, refine. It is not a rebellion against order. It is a restraint on certainty itself. If you claim to know what virtue is, you must explain how you know it, why your explanation holds under pressure, and what it costs you to live by it when the world disagrees. The aim wasn't to demolish Athens, but to liberate it from its own unexamined habits. The moral values that endure are the ones that fear no critique, that invite revision, that survive the brutal test of disagreement. The trial that followed was not simply a political verdict. It was a public verdict on whether a city can tolerate a citizen who keeps insisting that morality is not a badge, but a quest. The jurors, bound by the weight of tradition and fear of dissent, condemned him not because he proclaimed vice, but because he demanded that virtue be justified, argued out loud, and not merely assumed. In the end, Socrates faced death with the same quiet resolve with which he faced every question, by owning his position openly, without the illusion of certainty, even when certainty would have been easier, safer, more compliant. What does that choice teach us about moral values today? It teaches that moral life is not a finished product handed from generation to generation. It is a conversation across centuries, a continuous practice of asking what we owe to each other and to what standard we aspire. Socrates didn't leave behind a set of rules. He left a discipline to test, to question, to refine, to live with the awareness that every answer will invite another question. The moral landscape thus becomes a living field, tended by people who fear not the discomfort of doubt, but the stagnation of certainty. If we fast forward to our own time, the image of Socrates challenges every claim to moral authority that does not invite scrutiny. It's easy to secure a position with slogans, rituals, or majority support. It's harder to defend it when examined by careful minds, when it must prove its worth in the open air of reason, public debate, and quiet reflection. The Socratic challenge is not merely about what is right in a given moment. It is about what kind of people we must become to decide rightly together over time. The unexamined life, he warned, remains a life half-lived, even if it is perfectly aligned with tradition. So the century-old question returns with fresh force. What is virtue, and how do we know it? Socrates didn't provide a final syllabus, but he left a transformative method, a habit of living that makes moral values fragile enough to be tested and strong enough to endure. He showed that the deepest challenge to values is not opposition from outside, but the quiet, persistent invitation to look inward, to call our own beliefs into question, and to choose not certainty, but integrity under scrutiny. In that sense, Socrates remains not a relic of the past, but a living instrument for arrogance more than moral ambiguity. The man who asked the right questions, not the right answers, is the reason philosophy persists as a practice rather than a proclamation. If you want to understand moral values today, you must begin with his method: courage to question, humility to listen, and the stubborn, hopeful belief that better answers are worth the trouble of asking the hard questions again and again. The moral conversation is ongoing. If we listen closely, it will nudge us toward a more careful, more generous, more rigorous life. That is Socrates' lasting gift. A reminder that virtue is not a banner to wave, but a discipline to cultivate. And in cultivating it, we may discover that the real challenge is not defeating others with our beliefs, but transforming ourselves with the pursuit of truth. Let curiosity guide your choices. Doubt becomes a compass, steering growth. Now we ask, if virtue must be earned by effort, what becomes of mercy, tradition, and power when they resist scrutiny? The answer is humble and stubborn. Think clearly, choose bravely, listen patiently, and keep reforming as long as doubt remains. Let this be the ongoing test of a life